Good evening, everybody. My name is Deonte Ward. I'm excited to be a part of this global day of action for Black Power. I chose to share a little bit of knowledge on. Uh, sorry, I'm going to share a little bit of information on nonprofits and how my organization was able to get some grants and then also be successful at our initiatives. So what I'm showing you today is one of our presentations that we had presented at the beginning of the e-learning this past school year. So one second. What we wanted to do with the school was have a mentorship program that connected our youth sports with the school system. And um, it was my idea to believe that if we brought the school system with our youth sports, that we was going to be able to control the e-learning. And so what I was asking the mentors was to commit weekly with our program, and we would like for them to really just have a good communication with the youth, because unfortunately in our community that was one of the things that we lacked, was a black role model or a black male role model in our communities for our young men. And we wasn't really asking them to be like the fathers of these young men, but just somebody that they could look up to, connect to, and that was going to be consistent in their life outside of just their mom or a cousin in the family. And it was important that we explained to them as well that we wasn't asking them to spend money with the kids, but just build a relationship, because we didn't want the families to believe that mentorship was based on spending money. And so before the pandemic, I had the opportunity to speak at a school, or speak at this particular school. And when I went to the school, I had noticed that there were a large group of youth playing football for a team that I had previously coached that year. And when I went there, they immediately started engaging with me, and they didn't know that I was there to speak as a motivational speaker. They just knew me as a football coach. So instantly, I had already had that connection and that attention, where I think if it was somebody else, they would have had to get on stage, and then be that entertainer to gather a lot of the youth attention. So it was an upper hand, and I felt like that upper hand was something that we could use to our advantage in the Black community to really help out our youth. So one thing about nonprofits, and when I originally started doing community work, I was 18 years old, or 31 years old now. This was in 2007. Um, One thing that I did was I always had some kind of like initiative for our youth. And even though I didn't collect data and things like that, I just made sure that I collected picture and things like that as proof to show that what I was doing was working, because my groups was growing. But one thing that I wish I had known, and I pass on to a lot of people today, is the importance of collecting data, and data as far as how many youth are attending your event, or how many people are attending your event, whether it's just a cookout that you have and you feeding hamburgers, hot dogs, waters, and chips. Always have an exact amount of how many chips, waters, hot dogs, and things you have. And then you also want to, as many people as you can, you at least get like a name and an email address. for two reasons. You can always update these people when you have an upcoming events, and these are names that you can put inside of your database. As far as when you're going for grants and things, you can say, hey, look, this past year I held 5 cookouts. Each cookout we fed at least 250 people. These are the 250 people that register each one. For the first two cookouts, we were in the summertime, so people really wanted hot dogs and hamburgers. So we gave out 500 hot dogs and hamburger versus in the wintertime, people wanted soups. So we didn't do hamburgers and hot dogs. So that kind of information is important pertaining to the data that you collecting for grant purposes. But for this particular presentation, I wanted to focus on risk factors because risk factors was something that was in a grant that I had got within the federal government, and it was based on gun and gang violence. So my original presentation for this grant that I pulled this data from, there were, I want to say 100. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly how many numbers, but there were like 150 risk factors that was presented in this National Gang Center database. And out of 150 of those risk factors, I presented 109 of them that we were dealing with or talking about. 98 of those, oh, I'm sorry, actually, it's right here. It was 109 of those risk factors. 98 of those risk factors was presented in my curriculum. And then what I did was I broke down how long my program was going to be for, what each day was pertaining to, what they will pull away from each day, or at least what we would talk about. And within that, there were at least a certain amount of risk factors that we will present either that day or during that weekly topic. And that was important information because that ultimately showed them that we wasn't just running a program, but we were running a program that was geared towards the issues that our youth were facing in the community. And we presented also information that can show that how we were going to be able to work with these youth in these particular programs or events that we will hold in regards to our youth. And also, when you want to focus on a grant or any kind of nonprofit initiative, you always want to talk about like the things that you're going to either impact them with, some of the things that are going to be effective within that impact, some of the things that you may know about that particular subject. For instance, let's just say for this pandemic, we knew that 3 out of 5 kids was passing, or prior to the pandemic, that were 3 out of 5 children that was passing in high school, 12th grade math. After the school shut down from the pandemic, now we have 1 out of those 5 that's graduating. So what you would want to show is what was the impact of the school shutdown, and then within the impact, what could the organization do to not only get that back to that 3 out of 5 number, but possibly make that 4 out of 5 students that's graduating or that's in that class passing at that time. So what we did was like within our program, what we do or what we wanted to present to them was how we would impact that child, and we wanted to give them something visual. So in this impact section, that's what we primarily talked about. Putting that person that's reading this presentation in the shoes of these youth that we're targeting, or the organization, what we're presenting to them to fulfill these immediate needs right now. And again, it's important that you have some kind of data backing a lot of the things that you're saying, whether it is just like some notes from a link that you can present to them, whether it's a graph from a link that you can present to them. As you've seen in the risk factors, I talked about, I'll go back up to it in a second. I talked about the National Gang Center. That's where we got a lot of the information from. Give me 1 second. Actually, I apologize. I have to go get the power to my computer so I don't die you. So give me about 1 second or 1 minute, and I'll be right back. There we go. I apologize about that. Um, but as I was saying, I pointed out uh, and had the link to where I got a lot of this information from, and that's imperative when you're doing this kind of work because you always want to show people that you know what you're talking about. And what this particular presentation was talking about was how could we close the gap with our youth being on e-learning, and we knew last year the participation rate was very low. For example, this school in particular, I had a relationship with the principal, so I was able not to get the information from him, but just to see like what was the things that we could help as far as the organization with the school. And I also was in connection with the actual board of education as they were doing their Zoom calls and meetings in reference to how they were going to change this upcoming school year versus how they were effective or least effective last year during the pandemic and the e-learning. So there was a few things that we know about our children that our kids get on the computers, on the game systems, they cell phones. So we knew it wasn't an issue with them really getting on the internet. It was what was being presented to them through the school system. So we wanted to find ways to have our youth still, or not still, but to be intrigued or to log on the computer and not just log on, but also participate and really grasp what's going on through the e-learning. So we had originally presented that we would have like these intramural sessions where we would have like a local celebrity or somebody like a high school football player come on with one of our elementary schools, and it would be like a 10-minute pep rally every Friday or every Monday. And there will be a reward for them having like the highest participation rate for that school in the county, or let's just say that school within that small district. But also, we would use a lot of the Title I schools, and if y'all familiar with what a Title I school is, that's where majority of the school is getting reduced lunch, which is majority of the time your lower income communities. But what we wanted to talk about was like being transparent with our youth. By being transparent, we felt like we could really engage with them and they would be open to what we were saying to them. And by being transparent, we meant telling them like some of the issues that we went through at their age so that they knew so that they could learn, although we are men and we may seem successful to them now, that we went through the same obstacles and problems that they went through, so they can relate their life to us, and that they can have some sort of comfort to know that they could get out of their problems and have a possible successful career, because they see that from somebody not only in front of them but the same skin color, within the same communities, in Annapolis, maybe not from Newtown, but from Rhymewood or from Bywoods or from Eastport. And then what we wanted to present to them is that we knew how to be effective, right? We had effectiveness training classes or courses that we would give to our mentors. We will also have mentor courses that they would do quarterly coming in as beginners. And then after our first quarter of school, we will refresh them on some things, or we will figure out what worked for them based on what information we gave them, or what didn't work based on the information they gave or we gave them. And then they would do their own observations and they would give us feedback, which I'll roll into actually is the next one is a IAP, which is an individual action plan. But to be effective, one of the biggest keys as a mentor is having listening skills. And that's probably the biggest requirement as a mentor, because you're not there to really highlight your life or to speak a lot. You're really there to give that person a platform to be expressive, to be open and to learn, to really grow. You are just there as to be their mirror image, or to be that mirror in front of them and give them a different reflection to see. So as being like an active listener or active listening, that's very important. And then questioning is also very, very important as a mentor, because sometimes your questions could intimidate the youth, but also your questions could really open up to some things. And with one of my mentors, he's always good at never asking a hard question, but always asking questions to ease in the topic. Maybe that's something that he know about me that I don't want to speak on, but he's very cautious to how he wants to present it to me. So he'll offer, oh, he'll present to me a question, maybe like, how was your day? And he'll let me express my emotions versus asking me, am I angry knowing that I just got in an argument or something? He'll let me say, yeah, my day wasn't that good. And he was like, do you want to elaborate on it? Do you not want to talk about it? Again, he's presenting that opportunity to me versus saying, hey, let's talk about what happened. Um, and then he's also, being very observant to some of the responses that I may have within those questions or answers. If I'm answering a question, and right now my attitude is as calm and simple as it is now, and then at the end of it I'm very hostile, and I'm getting like teary-eyed, he's gonna back off, and he's gonna try to find a solution within these questions he's asking me as well. So maybe he's leading me up to saying, after talking to you for 30 minutes, I found out that A, you wasn't having a great day. B, you wasn't having a great day because you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you woke up on the wrong side of the bed because of this, so he's really listening to the small things that I'm telling him, and he can give me a real truthful answer at the end, what could be a solution for me. And even if that's not a solution, he's walked me through the problems that I was facing, that I can think of my real solution now, because a lot of the times as mentees, when we're going through our emotions, we're not really thinking through everything. We're just being very responsive based on what we're going through. So, those are some important things that we will incorporate in this particular proposal. Is we're saying that we're going to help our youth be effective. Well, how will we help our youth be effective? We're teaching, or not teaching, but we're showing them that we are listeners. Not only that we are listeners, but we're helping them with resolving the issues, whether it's at school or at home. And again, we're introducing the sports to the school. So this gives us an opportunity to be within these youth life more hours throughout the day, because now we're able to mentor and monitor them during school. We're also able to mentor and monitor them during sports. And then we have our own programs within school and sports. So if there's a day off that they're not in sports, they're at our programming. And that gives us access to them almost 10 to 12 hours out the day. And then there's some households that could really use our benefits. So now we're 16 hours into a family's household really building. And this is what a lot of organizations outside of the Black community do, whether it's the white community, whether it's the Spanish community. They all build within a community. And one thing that I noticed about within my community in Annapolis is there were a lot of organizations during the pandemic, at least, that were getting these grants based on the data and the things that we're doing in the past. But our community was the most used community. A lot of these grants were directed to the lower income, the Title I schools, the underserved, the at risk, whatever words or terminology they used to describe our children to get these grants. They would just, tearing the fur off the federal government. And here it is 6 months into this pandemic, we don't have these same nonprofits and organizations doing the work that we desire. So it's up to us to really attack and go for these kind of opportunities as far as grants and things like that, to really make sure that we're providing for our community, as well as the people that just come into our community to use our youth as statistics. And, I'm not taking away from the work that they could actually do, because I think a lot of them do great work in our communities. But there's always that financial aspect behind it. Prior to me working, or prior to the pandemic, I was working with about 5 nonprofits. In the middle of the pandemic, I found myself contracted with almost 13 to 15 nonprofits. And I had the opportunity to really become a gold mine during the pandemic as far as working with our youth and things like that. But I just realized in this philanthropy world that there's always like, borderline I'm sorry, I can't find my word. There's always like this borderline boundary that you have to set as far as working with the community and using the community. And I really seen that boundary line during this pandemic. So I stopped working with a lot of organizations and I really just focused on mine. And in a sense, I felt like I took away from some opportunities for our youth, but at the same time, I just didn't feel comfortable with allowing these organizations to benefit off our children, where their goals, where their benefits as organizations are long term. They're getting 150, $200,000 grants within our community. There's only been spent $10,000 on supplies and materials and things like that. So I felt uncomfortable giving them that opportunity to have access to our youth, and I really made them do the work. Or if they really wanted to have the access that they desired, I gave them ultimatums to really come into our community. Like, you have to hire maybe 2 to 3 people in this community within that grant period to, say that they were managing the communities through your grant, and this is giving people opportunities to learn the grant world, whether they just become volunteers or whether they have been volunteers, and we're trying to teach them how to hold a position in a nonprofit world. Because whether a lot of people know it or not, as a Black person in our community, we do a lot of free work for our youth, while a lot of other communities are making a profit doing that. And I wanted to make sure that I was on the other end of the table. Not to say that I just wanted to make profit from the work that I was doing, but I wanted this to be a full-time position for me to be able to really help out the community the best way that I could. So I had to make this not just something that I fell in love with and doing out the kindness of my heart, but also making sure that I was getting paid to do it so I can really put my time and effort into it. And that took me to the next level of understanding the business. Why was it important to collect data? What was the data actually being used for? What does a database look like? What does it mean to sit on a board? Why does nonprofits have to have boards? Like, these are a lot of questions that I started to ask myself, or that were being presented to me. What does your nonprofit do? Where's your board? Who's on your board? And I would go back and I would just keep, asking myself these questions or looking up these kind of things to figure out what was being asked of me and why did I not know of this. And a lot of the times it's because the information just wasn't presented into our community. So when you're dealing with nonprofits and you're working with children, a lot of the things, or I won't say a lot of the things, but a lot of the organizations have something similar to an individual action plan. And the individual action plan just really helps identify the needs of that individual child. And as you see, some of the goals of the action plans or the areas that we really want to focus on is making sure that they have the support, the family around them, or they have the right resources through that support, making sure that the mentors are being empowerful, or making sure that the mentors are empowering, and that they're really like giving them something to look forward to, really using our community resources as well. And I spoke on, again, setting those boundaries. As a mentor, we want to not only set boundaries for our youth, but for ourselves as well. So when we're setting these boundaries as a mentor, we're putting these same boundaries or these same goals and expectations for ourselves. So actually, at times, I never even give expectations or boundaries to my youth. I let them set them for themselves. And if I felt like they wasn't high enough, then I wouldn't force them to set high expectations or goals or boundaries, but I would just tell them, like, what's your ultimate goal? What do you really want out of life? Do you think that boundary or expectation that you set for yourself is high enough to really reach that goal that you desire? And it's almost like guilt tripping them. You really want them to deep or to think deep into what they're doing and really find a purpose, because they'll become distracted, and focus is important in this mental world. Um, well, I know within my city, the population here is like 38,000 people. Um, when I started as a motivational speaker, the first thing I looked up was how many schools was within my county. When I found out how many schools was within my county, I looked up the middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools. Then I looked at how many of those schools was Title I schools. Um, when I figured out how many of those schools was Title I schools, then I started calling and asking, did they have any speaking opportunities available at those schools? What I did was, even though there wasn't any speaking opportunities at those schools, I presented myself to them. So even though this was just for my speaking engagements at the time, it's the same thing that you do in a nonprofit world. Um, Grants are completely different. You can't just call your the grantee and be like, hey, I'm looking to apply for your grant. What do I need to do? What you do is you just put yourself in the name or the face of like some of these people that may sit on the board, and this requires a lot of research, and it's based on what kind of grants that you try and get. There are $1 million grants out here. There are just $1,000 grants out here. You can get them through the state, federal, city. Other nonprofits give out grants. So be very informative on what you're trying to get as far as grants, who's giving the grants. Make sure that the information that they're requiring for the grants that you have, and make sure that that information is something that's visible as well. So you having internet, oh, I'm sorry, you having a website, you're having some source of social media. In today's world, these are very important. And within my organization, one thing that I learned, there were multiple organizations that were coming to my community serving the youth, whether it was, again, sports, whether it was reading clubs, whether it was writing clubs, whether it was poetry clubs, whether it was some kind of photography, videography, whether it was homework club. But a lot of these programs were being constantly offered to the youth within that same circle. So you would have 13 programs, but 13 youth were getting offered these 13 programs versus the entire community. So what I wanted to do was gather as many youth as possible, and then figure out what was important to them, or what would they like the most, and then incorporated whatever it was that we were trying to teach to our youth within those programs. So if a lot of the youth like football, instead of having a football play called a 27 sweep right, we would call it maybe this let's see, arithmetics, and then we would explain arithmetics into why we sweeping the ball. Or maybe it was basketball. Instead of calling the 3-point shot a 3-point shot, we would call a 3-point shot like I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of something random off the head. Instead of, let's say we wouldn't call it not a 3-point shot, but a post play, we would call it like the African dunk, right? And then by them thinking of the African dunk, we could explain what Africa was, And then when we run in this play in practice, we would say, pass the ball to Madagascar, and that would be to the right of Africa or to the left of Africa. And then we would say, pass the ball down the Nile. We would describe like, the big man is at the bottom of the Nile River, So these are ways that we will become very like informative and really trying to teach our youth information without having them sitting down constantly with a pen and paper writing out, where's Africa at on the map. They just will be able to know based on that basketball play that they ran. Or if it was boxing and we teaching them a 1-2 punch, but they can't remember their multiplication tables. So now we're giving them multiple combinations from punches that's on the multiplication table, you know. We're giving them a 6-punch combo, and we're throwing in there the multiplications of twos for each punch. They got to go to the next one. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Or maybe we're doing threes, 3, 6, 9, 12, you know. So we just found ways to really be informative with our youth, and making sure that we're being as educational as possible through some of the most simple and basic things that they're already doing every day. So, you know, especially our organization was our organization name was Black Wall Street Mentoring. So we had to make sure as a Black Wall Street organization that we incorporated business within each of these trainings or programs that we offered. And so we made sure that we talked about financial literacy within almost every aspect of what we did, whether it was, you know, talking about football, and we would tell them the different job titles in football and how much each person made within football, and how you could use football from youth to college to get to that professional position, even if you didn't make it to the NFL. And we were telling the same thing with like playing chess. You know, professional chess players may not make millions of dollars, but they could travel the world to 356 chess clubs, charging $10,000 per visit. You know, that's how they became a millionaire. So we were really trying to install in our youth, no matter what you're doing, there's a possible way of making money as long as you became the best at what it was, and that competition was only within. Um, and for us to acquire a lot of these grants, I'm going to talk about financial literacy in two ways. I'm going to talk about it as to really trying to get a grant, and then how you should probably spend your funds within the grant, because this was my first year actually acquiring a large grant, which was like $90,000. The first large grant that the organization I was contracting with ever got. It was based on the work that I was doing. And to me, I felt like I had failed the organization, because with the scope of work it was requiring, I could not fulfill that demand. But as far as running my programs and things, I was very successful. I had a lot of youth participating. We exceeded the numbers that we had originally wanted to have within the organization. But there was a lot of learning curves. There was a lot of mistakes that I made as far as being in the grant world, being a legit nonprofit, and really being a contractor fulfilling these requirements based on what the grant was asking for, which is, again, in the scope of work. So for this particular grant that I was working through, we were required to have 40 youth, 40 mentors in an 18 months time period. We had to acquire that. At the end of it, I had acquired it, but it was last month that I had ended up really gathering the mentors, because it took 17 months for people to really see the vision that I had, you know, at the beginning of the 18 months, and to really go through all the bumps and bruises by myself or with an organization that was growing and learning as much as I was. And I'm only 30 years old, so it was hard, because I was one of the oldest people within this small organization that we had built, teaching each other and learning our mistakes to be able to present to an organization or to this global Black Awareness Day to really prevent the next person from making these mistakes. So the scope of work was and will always be important. For those that know what scope of work is, you're probably shaking your head laughing right now. But always watch the language in those, because even after my original grant period or the fiscal year of that grant, I wrote into another fiscal year of a grant, which was through the county, not through the federal government. And they just rolled over some of that same literacy, but I had to change it. You know, it was hard to acquire 40 mentors within the communities that I'm serving, because it sounds funny, but nonprofits became like a competition in my city. not in a bad way, but I just think a lot of people seen it like they wanted to really be connected in their own way, so they wanted to start their own nonprofit. And within like a 2-year time frame, there were maybe like 5 Black nonprofits that I knew of to maybe 30 of them, and I was working with half of them. Whether I was on a team, on a board, helping them with information, they helping me out with information. I was just trying to make sure that I connected with almost every last one of them, or at least I knew somebody that was affiliated with them, because that's how you really grow. And that's what we're doing right now. Like, we're trying to connect as many organizations together as possible that we can share, or so that we can share the resources that we all acquire within those individual organizations that we are part of. But back to that, back to this topic, the scope of work was something that I just was really struggling with. So um, as I got into like my first quarter of the grant, they were really pushing me to get outside of what I had traditionally been doing within mentorship and really focus on my youth, having individual mentors. But it just wasn't something that the community in the city was really engaged in at the time. The group setting was more popular. There were better activities that you could do, and it didn't require as much commitment on both ends for the youth to really have to do something, with a person one-on-one, as well as that mentor really wanting to work with that youth one-on-one. Because to some people that was almost like another job. To some people, they didn't really want to feel like they were required to be that or big brother figure to that child. They just wanted to offer their time when they could. So we couldn't really put them in a category as a mentor. We had to put them as more of a volunteer. And that's what we got. A lot of mentors being volunteers that would just pop in when they had the time, and help out within whatever we had or we needed help within that day. And that hurt us ultimately. So I had to constantly deal with trying to revamp what my program looked like based on the scope of work. And after my grant period was over, I realized that I'm as of now, like, I will only go after grants that fit what my organization looked like versus accepting a grant based on what people wanted to offer me or my organization. Because I had to go outside of my comfort zone multiple times to create or get what the scope of work was looking for. And it was a great learning lesson and learning tool. But when you're looking at our communities and us doing this kind of work, you don't want to have to use a community as a learning tool or a learning lesson. At least that's how I felt. So I had to really step back at the end of this grant and collect my thoughts and things walking into this next fiscal year to make sure that I was really serving my community the right way. And again, that's why I just went to these multiple streams of different programs to really make sure I was grasping the attention of all the youth that came within my program. So when you're looking at that grant that you're trying to get, and when you are submitting a proposal or a budget, there are some important terms and things that you want to make sure you're putting aside of these proposals. Your terminology is very important. So you always go look at that particular grant that you're trying to get, pour those keywords out. Let's say if they are putting in there the scope of work terminologies, they're requiring these X, Y, and Z's. Go to what you're already doing that could present those X, Y, and Z's. If it's asking you a simple question of how is 1+1, or can you show me 1+1 = 2, go to what you've been doing within your organization and show them how 1+1 is 2. Because some people may draw a picture, some people may use an object, some people may use a calculator. So you as an organization have to find what is the best way to present to them what is 1+1 to make 2. You could be even more creative and go with 1.5 plus a half. That may be something that's never been presented to them, and that may make them interested in what you're doing. But because you're presenting something to an organization that's completely outside the box, I feel like that's where you have to have the most information for them to understand what you're trying to do. Because originally brought into this opportunity, originally I was brought into this grant proposal based on helping somebody else. And everybody at the table spoke up, including myself. I served these communities. Why wasn't I being presented these opportunities? And they just looked at me as a young person that didn't really understand what was going on, which was kind of truthful. But had I not had this experience, how would I been able to really learn and become that person that they maybe wanted to bring into the community, which would have had to go through the exact same thing that I went through anyway, because they wasn't familiar with the communities. They would have still had to way to build and become acquainted with all these people within that 18-month period, which is like, again, another learning curve. You have to bring somebody in. They have to get acquainted with the community, start doing the work, and then they do the work. The grant period's over. Most of the times, that may be the end of that grant, especially if he's not presenting the right information, data-wise, or based on what the scope of work is asking or requiring. So take that into consideration. But because I had all this information that they were trying to get me present to this guy as a volunteer, I just had put in my own proposal and presented what I knew that they were trying to do that I was already doing. Had I not had pictures and people to back me, I probably wouldn't have gotten this grant opportunity, because I didn't have the data to prove what I was doing was effective and really working. So just always remember that, whether you serving 10 children, 1 children, 100 children, 10 families, whether it's animals, whether it's you counting the clouds in the sky, you always want to show proof that you've counted those skies in the cloud, or those clouds in the sky, and that information that you present to them is accurate information. And then when you're presenting a proposal, you also want to make sure that you're showing them how you're going to break down that proposal within a budget. So if you presenting a proposal for a $90,000 grant, you want to say maybe $45,000 of that grant is going to operation budgets, which is paying maybe a secretary, which is paying maybe your program director. And maybe you want to say out of that other 45,000, 22 and a half of that is going to go to transportation, meals, and materials. And then the other 22 and a half of that will be dedicated to, let's say, creating your social media, creating your, or let's just say marketing and networking and things like that. Those are important because they want to see, prior to them giving you that money, what would they get out of them giving you that money. And same thing with a lot of private donors and things like that. They want to know that if they're going to give you this $1 million, how is this $1 million going to be spent? Will it make an impact like they assume that it will be? Or if it's not going to make the impact they want, what kind of impact will you make with the money that they're providing you? So you always want to make sure, as a nonprofit, that you are a legit nonprofit, that you have your 501c3, which is your tax exempt form. When you're submitting these proposals and you're putting in there an operation budget, make sure that you're putting in there your accountant as well. As far as for me, what I learned also, going to like different meetings and things like that, was a lot of the work that I got done within my organization wasn't because of the money. It was because of the volunteers and the people that supported what my goals were or my dreams was, and to really help in my community. And you have to take that into consideration and really focus on that before you're really trying to focus on the money. You have to grow success within your community and your organization without financially having the money to do it. Because a lot of the times, if you're always basing your organization off of grants or things like that, then you're going to probably fail when there's no grant opportunities for your organization out there. So just remember, 70% organizations probably succeed based on the volunteers and the free things that they get to offer within the organization. And like I said, this proposal that I had presented to y'all was based off my Black Wall Street mentoring program. And within that organization or within our programs, we're always making sure that we're presenting some kind of business mindset or business opportunity with our youth. This past few months, we've did picnic tables within the communities and churches. So what we would do is a church will hire our organization to build picnic tables. We will pay our youth the stipends through that money and give them an opportunity not only to acquire a skill but to make money. And not only is this showing or not only are you able to like collect data from this based on how many children participated in this particular event, not only how many children participated in the event, but how many of them actually stayed within that event. How many of them were successful at the beginning to the end process? How many of them were successful at actually building something, not just participating, saying that they were there, but actually played a vital role in making sure that that picnic table was built? And then what was the turnaround speed? How many picnic tables did you build? Did any of them fall apart? Like all these different kinds of data to collect ultimately gave me an opportunity at the end of all these projects to present within the art world some STEM projects, whether it was just building the picnic tables, or STEAM projects, whether it was building the picnic tables, teaching them the engineering and mechanics of it, whether it was teaching them the mathematics of it, the measurements through a tape measure, whether it was the art aspect of it, and we were teaching them how to draw within mathematics by gridding the images onto the tables. We literally just used every aspect that we could to teach our youth entrepreneurship, education behind entrepreneurship. Why is it important to make money, how to make money, then how to invest that money within yourself, your community, what is the sole proprietor, all those important things within every aspect of our program. And at the end, our goal ultimately is to make sure that our children are able to develop the proper knowledge and skills for them to reach their full potential at the end of whether it's high school or college and going into their adulthood life. So that's pretty much my presentation. I hope that I was very informative to everybody and that you really took away something from this. If you want to support me and my goals, or if you want to reach out to me, I'll share my email, or not my email, my social media links. My Facebook is D Ward, that's DEEWARD. My youth program is Black Excel. That is all capital letters as an acronym for Becoming Leaders, Acquiring Critical Knowledge. Excel is short for excellence, and that's Instagram as well. Again, so Facebook and Instagram is Black Excel. And you can check out our website as well at blackexcelprogram.com, BLACKEXCELPROGRAM.com. And I hope y'all enjoy it. Work with me. We're still building on that website, putting more content in it. But I appreciate this opportunity. Remember, today is an important day. It is really about sharing the knowledge of what you do and how you impact the community, and what you can give to a person like me so that we can be more impactful within the communities that we serve. So again, I thank y'all. I love y'all. Peace and blessings, and I share.